Hello and welcome back to the Hyperthesis episode 75. Today also we have a very special guest, Austin. My name is Feely.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Liam.
And Austin here.
All right, as you can hear, we have a special guest today, Austin. So, Austin is an optometrist friend of ours, and he completed his bachelor degree in chemistry from San Francisco Xavier University, where we all went. And then he trekked on to the American side to the Michigan College of Optometry of Farrell State University. And after a few years there, he earned his Doctor of Optometry. And now he's working as an optometrist in British Columbia. All right. So in light of optometry, I believe we have a somewhat related intro topic from Liam.
Yes. So I found this paper titled Spiral Diopter Freeform Lenses with Enhanced Multifocal Behavior. So getting straight into optics. Yeah, it's a bit much, but it was published recently in the Optica journal, and the researchers claim to have developed this spiral-shaped lens that maintains a clear focus at multiple distances, as well as multiple different lighting conditions. So we've talked about the human eye in optics before. I don't remember which episodes, but we talked about things like the different kinds of lenses and how glasses work on a pretty basic level, because me, Feely, and Patrick are not eye doctors. We don't know too much about eyes, but we tried. And we also typed about this special type of lens called a Fresnel lens, and maybe that was a different episode.
The Fresnel lens.
Fresnel,
well,
right. I pronounced it wrong in that episode as well.
Well, I think for us physicists, we can see that, usually we learn optics, and it's like, how light work and how lights are generated. Oh, these are electromagnetic wave. You solve specific equations and you learn its behavior as wave and then as particle. But then you realize practically for humans, it enters our eyes and we stop knowing what's going on. And I think that's where his expertise come in. But so what about that lens? What's so special?
Yeah. So as a quick little reminder, a simple ideal lens. We're physicists, so we assume that real world effects don't matter at first. So it's the simplest ideal lens. The ones you might learn about in an introductory optics textbook, or the ones you might have on your glasses, although those aren't simple lenses, but let's pretend they are. They have a single focal point, which means the light enters and it focuses on the other side at a single point, and it kind of depends on how far away the light source is. So if the light source is really far away, there'll be one focal point. If the light source is really close to your glasses, it'll be a different focal point. So if you're near farsighted, and maybe Austin can comment more on this later, I might get it slightly wrong, but the idea is that the lens in your eye, so not your glasses, but the one that's actually in your eye, it's supposed to focus the light on your retina, but if you're far nearsighted, it might focus it in front of or behind your lens, or behind the retina. And I always get the two mixed up, which one's far or nearsighted.
I could kind of fill in some gaps here. So nearsighted, essentially you kind of think of it like two different things. Like there's the object in front, and then what's the object which is in front of your eye, and then what gets projected after going through the lens, which is then called the image. I don't know, you guys would have probably handled that.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you're nearsighted, you are, the thought is everyone thinks they can see up close and they can't see far away. That's what most people know as nearsightedness. But essentially, like, your focal point is just a little bit more near to you than completely at distance. So somebody who's nearsighted is just focused in a little bit from from optical infinity would be the word, but basically beyond 6 meters, I believe, or 20 feet.
I thought so. The image fall before the retina because the focus is closer.
Yeah, and then the next thing would be, so nearsightedness man, if I got this stuff wrong, it'd be pretty embarrassing. But no, people who have nearsightedness have what's called myopia. That's kind of another term for it, which is essentially the eye itself is kind of longer. That's kind of and then you're more prone to other like biological diseases, but this is a physics thing, so we'll keep it physics based. Myopic eyes or nearsighted eyes tend to be longer, and the focusing point tends to focus before the retina. Okay, does that?
Yeah, it's like because the eye is longer, the retina's a bit further back than it should be.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and then
But what about this
farsightedness.
spiral lens?
Yeah, farsightedness is just the opposite.
The
Okay,
opposite.
Exact opposite. Yeah.
yeah. So I have to build up to it. I'm telling a story, So that's a perfect lens. But no lens is perfect, right? There's this stuff called aberration, and there's different kinds of aberration. But instead of having a single point of focus, it creates kind of this small focal region. The better your lens is, the smaller the focal region is. The worse it is, kind of the bigger it is. But that's just kind of like a basic lens. So this new spiral lens paper, they propose that their lens, much like this type of lens called a progressive lens for vision correction. So Austin, my attempt at describing a progressive lens is that it's a lens that has different focal points depending on how you look through it. So if I look straight ahead, it'll correct the vision. It'll correct my vision so that my focal point might be further away, and then if I look down through the bottom, it might change it so that the focal point's different now. I might have that slightly wrong.
Yeah, actually, your understanding of it is perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a little bit about the wording. So I tell people about this all the time. It's really common. Usually happens in your 40s, right, where you need a progressive lens. So essentially, you can think about it. It's right in the word. It progressively becomes more for near as you look down in your lens. So it's calculated for optical infinity when you look up top, and then as you look down with your eyes, so you look through a further, like a more south point on the lens, it becomes more for up close. So your understanding is perfect.
Not because it's a new technology, it's progressive, but it's actually there's a progression of focal points.
And just to use like purely pluses and minuses, plus power is used for up close. So it becomes progressively more plus power as you look down in the lens.
So like bifocals are kind of like a two-mode version of progressive lenses where you look, there's like one focal point straight, and then it's like when you see like kind of older people with bifocals on. I don't see them as much anymore, but when I was a kid I did, where they were kind of like looking through the bottom of their glasses at their book, or instead of like turning their head down to look at it.
I think that might be a little different too, because some of them they actually like those two different glasses, two different material. Because remember, like old grandma reading glasses, or like glasses have like clearly there is like a distinct oval shaped part that they used to read.
But so progressive lenses can be used for certain eye conditions in real life, but they have some drawbacks. The images, I think, can get a little distorted depending on how close or far away they are. So you kind of, I don't know. I've never had progressive lenses, but I feel like you need to know where the focal points are on the glasses to kind of maximize their efficiency, so that you can get some distortion from them, essentially. And that's where the spiral lens comes in. They actually they still keep this multifocality, but they remove the distortion effects. And they also allow for the fact that when your pupils dilate, they let different amounts of light in. So they still keep these focal points pretty good, even when I didn't know that was even a thing, but apparently for progressive lenses, the lighting conditions, how much light is entering your pupil, can also have an effect on the focus. Whereas the spiral shape claims that doesn't matter. You could be tripping and your eyes could be really, your pupils could be way open, or you could be in a really dark room, or you could be in a very bright room, and they still keep that multifocality without any distortion.
I didn't know the intensity effect that, is kind of strange.
It might be intensity, it might be some weird like aperture thing. I don't know how that really
could be. That's more likely.
I could jump in if you guys like apertures and stuff. That gets pretty complicated for sure. But yeah, the pupil essentially, I mean, it's just an aperture as it is. And then a couple things make it bigger or smaller. So, like you guys said, dark conditions would make your pupil bigger. There's light conditions cause your pupil to shrink. But also One thing with progressives is when you look up close, there's a couple biological mechanisms in your eye where when you look up close, your pupil will actually get a little smaller.
Huh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so the spiral lens is kind of like a better version of a progressive lens. That was the take home I got from this paper.
How
So
thick
it
are they?
I don't know, but it immediately. So I'll come to that maybe at the end. But the spiral lens, you can immediately think it has imagine it has this wide range of applications. So you could maybe somehow implement it with contact lenses or with regular glasses. You could use it for a lot more physicsy things opposed to real world scenarios too. But the real world, using it for glasses for humans is probably the most obvious and best use of it. But you can imagine you can use it in like optics experiments because optics experiments have many lenses and mirrors in them. Some of these breadboard tables they have set up are pretty crazy. Maybe we can ask Dean to talk about that another time too. But you can also use them in imaging systems, things like cameras and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, the researchers actually, I found this quote where they say the potential implant, it could also be used as a potential implant for users or people with age-related farsightedness and could provide consistently clear vision, potentially revolutionizing ophthalmology. So I don't know too much about the procedures and the operations, but I know sometimes people have deformities in the lenses of their eye, or they even need the whole lens replaced. I've heard of before, so you can use lasers and and back in the day maybe like a scalpel for instance, but you can manipulate the lens of their eye to correct vision.
Yeah. If you want me to jump in here, so this is so when the lens gets hazy over time, it's a cataract. You probably would have heard that term.
Yeah.
So essentially, the lens just gets a little hazy over time. They say if you live long enough, you get cataracts, or when you get over a certain age, like that's your percent chance of needing cataract surgery. So usually, you're looking at like 70s, but that's when they physically take the lens out that's in your eye and they put an implant in. So yeah, it's like one of the top three most performed surgeries in the world, I believe. And there's a couple different sciences behind it, right? Like if you put one lens in there, it's not, and it's like an artificial lens, right? Like you're putting it in, it's not a natural human lens. So it only has one focusing distance. And now, like not that long ago, they came up with a multifocal lens, which is like concentric rings, where like some of the rings are for far away and some are for up close. So this spiral would be potentially kind of the next step where you kind of have a bigger range for implantable contact lenses. And the ophthalmologists are the ones who usually do surgeries, and they're definitely the ones who do cataract surgery. So that's why it says ophthalmology versus.
So yeah, the human, the lens that's in my eyes, not an artificial, but the one I was born with, or like born with and then grew or whatever. Those have a little bit of flexibility to them, I guess, right? Because you're saying that the I don't want to say a fake lens, but like an implanted um lens into someone's eye, it has one focal point because it's some material. It doesn't change its shape.
Yeah,
Or
that's exactly right. So
yeah,
essentially, your lens inside your eye has some muscles to it, and they get a little stiffer, and the lens itself gets a little thicker over time. So you kind of lose the ability to accommodate that lens. So we call it accommodation. Like that's how far you can go up close. So unfortunately, we lose a little bit of accommodation every year. Kind of like I said, by in our 40s, we notice we kind of need reading glasses, and then by 60, 65, I mean most of the accommodation is gone. Uh, so yeah, you got good lenses, I would say. All you guys do.
God bless.
Well,
But
it's like
just yeah. Oh, sorry, I was gonna
yeah,
say
like camera lens. You have like an automatic focus, right? Where it's like they use motor to focus on the object, but as you grow older, it's like have a manual focus. But no, not even manual. You have a fixed focus. You can't even turn. So like if something go close, go far, you're done.
yeah. So just to wrap this intro topic up, there's I'll post. We do an Instagram post for each new episode, and I'll try and do a photo of this spirally lens. It's kind of cool looking. But the kind of idea behind it is that its shape somehow creates many different focal points, so that the single lens behaves as if it were a bunch of different lenses with different shapes, but kind of all combined in one. So that's what makes it possible to see so clearly at these various distances, and it does so in such a way that things don't get distorted depending on the aperture or where you're looking through the lens. Which I scanned through the paper, and there's not enough time to talk about how that works, I think. So, but I thought it was pretty cool because, like you said, it's the kind of the next step that if you're going to replace a lens in someone's eye, you could give them one of these progressive lenses, but it has some downsides to it. It's better than being blind in an eye, but it has still some downsides. So maybe the spiral lens, if you can implement it that way, would be like it'd be a better solution.
Yeah, for sure. I would say I'm probably going to hear about it within the next handful of years, probably.
I thought you said spiral. I mean, I thought it'd be like a helix kind of type. I was like thick, but no. I also look up the paper. I was like, oh no, no, no. It's like the surface have kind of like the spiral shape, like 2D pattern on it, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I could talk more about it, but I want to get to Austin and his work. I don't want to be spending all day talking about this. Um, I have no idea how likely that I didn't fully read the paper. I don't know how close it is to being put in everyday glasses or eye surgeries, but there's potential for sure.
Yeah, years away.
Probably.
Yeah, usually from technology, like in research paper until its industrialization of it is quite a long time because a lot of tests. So if you want to use it with human, then it's much longer tests and ethics and whatnot. Well, anyways, we're gonna move on to our main topic for today, which is about vision and optometry. So I think one of the burning question that I used to have, actually, I think a lot of people would have this question is that, well, in terms of like in optics world, in human optics, there are different careers in it. And can you explain a little bit or like, well, what's the difference between ophthalmologist, optometrist, and let's say I don't know what they call it, the lens maker people? Um, are there other things around that we're not aware of? Like because people usually say, "Oh, I'm going to see an eye doctor." Well, what does that mean, right?
So yeah, I can take it. This would be one of my first questions too. I would say there's three like big ones, like most common ones, which would be optician, optometrist, and then ophthalmologist. Optician is the person who mostly deals with like the glasses, kind of the hard materials, kind of the shaping of the glasses, how they fit. It's quite opticsy really, and then not a ton of like eye health, but yeah, I think of them kind of in that way. And then optometrists, which are what I do, that's a lot of eye health stuff, but it's more of like a primary care, like first point of care kind of doctor. So people who go in for regular exams, I see a lot of like nice, healthy people. They don't have any problems. They just come for like regular checkups. So for me, I do like the glasses prescription and then health of the front of the eye and health of the back of the eye. And we can manage some diseases, some minor little like, you know, take things off the eye if you get something in there. But if you have something major or if you need a major surgery, kind of like we talked about earlier, that's when you go to an ophthalmologist. So the ophthalmologist, they do a lot of they do more than just surgeries. They handle like advanced diseases. Um, they do a little bit more than that, but that's kind of what I think of like the three optician, optometry versus ophthalmologist. And if you guys have questions about any one of those,
Well, so you also are a medical doctor in a sense, right? Do you like prescribe medicine?
yeah. So I guess I like the word primary care doctor because or doctor of optometry versus medical doctor because I don't have an MD, right? Like a optometry degree is different than an MD. Um, and, doctor is it's a kind of a blanket term for a lot of different things. So that's why I always call the medical doctors kind of the people who do with the general systemic health. So I don't call myself medical doctor, just primary care doctor, or entry to care, first point of care kind of eye doctor.
Right. I think ophthalmologists they have to finish medical school first, get their MD before they specialize into ophthalmology, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think opticianry would be. I think it's like a college course. I can't remember exactly how long. I believe it's a college course, like 2-year program maybe. But yeah, then optometry is like 4 after undergrad. And then ophthalmology is you take medical, so you take your MD, and then you go and specialize into eyes. Everybody I talk to, which is like patients, I talk to just people that are just in medical school. Kind of like you guys said, eyes are just really foreign because they're so much different than the rest of the body. So that's what I hear from basically everybody who takes an MD. Like eyes are kind of their own little world, their own little like alien world, but it's still in high demand. Like people, like ophthalmology is still a very popular, I want to say, um, popular branch of kind of being an MD because the people that want it kind of really go after it.
So, as an optometrist, just to kind of gain a better understanding, what's your kind of day to day like? What do you focus on? Like, obviously, you're doing a lot of the, again, primary care stuff or like first entry care things. So what do you do?
Sure, yeah. So I mean, it kind of depends where you work. I work at a not very medical place. I work in the mall actually with a company called like Bailey Nelson. So I don't see a ton of medical. I don't have like a ton of equipment. I'm in kind of a smaller office without some of the auxiliary equipment. But essentially, on my day to day, like we got patients essentially for in like half an hour time slots, and they'll come in. I don't really know how to give it an estimate, but let's say I have like 10 patients in like the morning or something. A good majority of them will come in without too much issues other than like blurry vision, right? And then a lot of them will have not worn glasses before, and we go to glasses. And then one huge part of our job is contacts. We do a ton of contacts versus because ophthalmologists don't do a ton of that. So kind of my day to day is mostly, blurry vision glasses. Then we go to contacts. Then there's a couple little medical things, specifically the front surface, like they'll have an infection or like a blood vessel will pop and like kind of the whole eye will look like just completely bloody and people will be really scared because you don't want to lose your vision. A lot of people, we kind of heard some surveys where people would rather die than lose their vision. A lot of people would. Um, so yeah, people will come in a little bit concerned, like, I got 2 eyes, I can't afford to lose this. But a lot of the cases we see are pretty common. You kind of put you can prescribe medications, kind of help it heal up. Yeah, so it's kind of a good range.
I'm wondering. So I was born with a bad optic nerve in my right eye. So I had to do that whole thing where they put an eye patch on me for like a year or something to strengthen it. And so I've been wearing glasses since I was like 2 or 3 or something. But it's kind of interesting to me that I don't know what the age of most people coming in. Like you say, a lot of people just come in with blurry vision. Like, what's kind of are these younger people, or are they older people, or are they even like middle-aged people just realizing like I should probably get glasses or something?
Yeah, so it depends on where you work. So right now, where I'm in the mall, I see a lot of like younger people, 20 to 50, right? Pretty young population. I did one placement at a veteran affairs center, and that was basically like everybody was older than retirement age of 65. Generally, you're looking at different problems for different age groups, right? So in the older population, you're looking at more degenerations that happen over time, like macular degeneration or glaucoma. With younger age groups, typically they recommend getting an eye exam at 6 months, 3 years, 5 years old. But not everyone follows that to a T. Definitely not the 6 months. A lot of people forget that one. But with kids, you're looking at more binocular vision problems, kind of like you said, you patched one eye. So a lot of vision development happens before 9 years old. So you definitely want to have a couple exams before 9 because the brain is kind of forming so fast and vision takes up such a large part of the brain. So in your case, likely that one eye with, like you said, a impaired optic nerve, probably like a micro optic nerve or hypoplasia of it.
I don't know, but I was told it was bad.
Yeah, so that eye likely had less connections with the brain kind of
Yeah.
forming during your young development. So it's good that you got in kind of at 3 years old. They could patch the strong eye and then force that eye to kind of form some connections with the brain and then give you good visual potential.
Yeah, I was told that if so my again, like you said, I think my mom brought me in at like 6 months or something. And most people don't. And the only reason why she did is because she was like at the mall or something and she saw like some half shredded poster on a board saying like get your kid's eyes checked. And she's like, I should probably do that. So she did, and I was told that I'd probably be blind in my right eye mostly if they hadn't if they had realized too late. So I would definitely recommend getting your kid's eyes checked because it was this easy fix, right? You just force the eye to work more and develop that connection to your brain better. So
Yeah, for sure. I would say, definitely a good story, good positive story. It kind of depends on the condition, right? Like if your eye turns, like it's not super uncommon for the eye to turn like out um, or like a little. Usually, it's out at a young age. So with eye turns, it depends kind of on the condition, whether it's easy to fix, whether you need like a surgery to line it up and then get better. But essentially, your odds are much improved if you get stuff done kind of before 9 years of age, and kind of the younger, the better.
Well, the moral story is W for Liam's mom.
God bless Sandra.
I want to talk a little bit about vision. Well, not a little bit, quite a bit about human vision. So the way I understand how the eye works was from basic biology when I learned when I was a little boy. And, you know, what I learned was that, well, you have this sphere or sphere-like shape of the eyeball, right? And in front of it, there is a hole we call the pupil. And there's some type of organ contracting and dilating the pupil to allow acting like an aperture that allows light to come in or limiting the amount of light, and the light would come into our eye, and then and there's a lens in front of it too, so that would focus the image or the incoming light ray onto the retina. And the retina is a screen, well, like a projector, right? When we use projector, there's a screen that we have to put on. And well, what our lens does is like the projector. When the lights come in, there's a projector have lens, and that would project the image onto the retina. And that's and what we learn in physics usually is that the image is upside down, right? Usually, if you have a normal concave lens, or is it no convex lens? Yes, the convex lens. You focus, and you can have the upside down image. And what I heard, I don't know how they experiment this. There's like, oh, babies see the world upside down for the first few months of their life, and then the brain adjusts to be upright. Maybe that's a myth, but that's what I learned from basically biology. And most of the disease or what's wrong with the eye is basically maybe there's something wrong with the fluid in the eye, maybe something wrong with the lens, maybe something wrong with the retina. So components have some faults. And the other thing I learned was that, well, there are specific types of cells at the retina that are responsible for color and shapes. I think they're different. So I want to hear how would you explain for someone with, let's say, my understanding, the very basic understanding, how the eyes actually work? Is it something that's more common misconceptions, or are any of what I said make any sense?
Yeah, you're certainly on the right track with a whole lot of it. I would say, kind of with the component parts of the eye, there's one, the cornea, that I want to talk about a little more. So, I mean, the light rays come in and they go through the pupil, like I said, and then they go to the lens, and the lens helps converge the light, right, like a convex lens, onto the retina, the screen, which you had all correct. But actually, what has kind of been shown is that the cornea, which is the clear front part of the eye, so it's the clear that's like kind of over or in front of the pupil and iris, or the colored part, right? So the cornea actually is the thing that causes most of the convergence of light. So, for example, just to put some numbers to it, like the diopter is the measurement of is most of like the optic like measurement essentially. I think it's like it's at 1/centimeters, or I don't know the exact units, but essentially, if the eye system is 60 diopters in that will help converge, 20 of it is the lens, and like 40 of it is the cornea. Okay, so I just wanted to just emphasize the importance of the cornea, the kind of clear front part of the eye, and that's why, if we get scratches there, infections there, that's kind of the nasty stuff. So the cornea is very important. It's our friend. So that's the only thing. Pupil was all good. Lens is good. We talked about that. Retina's fine. We can talk a little bit about retina. I find color vision very interesting, as well, as I'm sure you guys kind of do with your physics backgrounds. But I can talk a little bit about like the shapes first. So essentially, if you think about the eye, like the eye as a lens, if you have a light ray that's underneath that lens and it goes up, so that light ray is going up, it'll still converge, but it'll hit the top part of your eye. So the top part of your eye, of the inside of your eye, the top part of your retina is kind of responsible for seeing your lower visual field. Does that make sense? Okay. And then it kind of works kind of the whole way. So the right part of your retina is responsible for seeing the left part of your visual field. So that's kind of what we mean by everything's like inverse, because if you just took your eye at like face value, just what's on the retina, it would all be kind of flipped. So that's where then it gets sent to the brain, and then you learn to perceive the world in a certain way, kind of like right side up.
So I'm curious, just it was kind of mentioned that with children especially, it might take some time for that actual image to kind of, for the brains to almost realize. And I'm curious if you know any more about that. If there's like studies done about like a certain age where it's like, oh yeah, the world has magically flipped, or if it's like a slow process of, oh,
Is it even
what's
true?
gravity doing? Is it even true?
It's good. It's certainly fascinating. It's probably with perception more so than it is kind of what you objectively see, or what's going on between the eye and the visual system. So I don't think anyone's really been able to perceptually like capture that, like they're seeing things kind of upside down. It certainly brings on kind of other interesting stuff that can happen in the profession. Like there's some phenomenon in the profession like where someone's perception of the world is just totally different than what's actually going on. So there's one thing, I think it's called like Charles Bonnet disease or syndrome or something like that, where after significant vision loss, your brain will just start to fill in certain kind of areas. So I think Bonnet had he started seeing like these flowers everywhere, and they were just like not flowers. So usually it's like pleasant things, but it can be kind of unpleasant after some severe vision loss. So perception is probably like as much the brain as it is kind of the eyes.
Yeah, because hallucination, that's different, right? Like because there's a pattern recognition part that our brain does, like, oh, this is flower. And there was like this experiment, like the snake pattern recognition thing, when people are more perceptive if there's something in the shape of snakes. There's like, oh, maybe there's the evidence of years of evolution that for a human try to get away from snakes.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a little. I'll let Liam go.
I've just heard people make like I've heard this argument before, and again, I have no basis for this, so citation needed. But that like your brain uses it uses so much energy, and it's way more efficient for the brain. Like if I look at a basketball and I don't know what it looks like, I have to focus on it more. But if I've seen a basketball 1,000 times, my brain's just gonna fill in that image mostly for me. It's way more efficient for it to kind of fill in things. Like I always hear you have this blind spot somewhere in your vision, and your eye will just fill it in, kind of. So like you can't technically see what's happening there, but your brain just not your eye, but your brain just kind of puts something there to make you happy, I guess. I don't know if that's true or not. You're right. The eye is kind of interesting. Like there's a lot of, I always hear people talk about it, and they always say maybe it's true, maybe it's not. And
yeah, I can take it both those. So one kind of the perception side of it, being able to fill things in, like that's, I'm sure we've all seen those before, where they do like the reading, and then you see kind of they'll just match the first and last letter, and then you're just able like to read, or they'll cut little holes out of it, and you're able to read. So it's kind of, yeah, your eyes are more so kind of just like a driving vehicle for your brain to perceive the world, right? And then where it gets kind of dicey is like in our lives, what I find is that whenever people see something, they believe it to be true, right? Or their perception is kind of through their eyes, and everyone's perception is different. Like people will read 20/20 on my chart, and it'll be like that's the lowest I go, and they'll be like, I see super blurry. But then somebody else will come in and they'll see like 20/50, which is basically the letters 2.5 sizes bigger, and they'll be like, I see great. So kind of the perception part in the brain is just a little bit dicier. And then in terms of the blind spot, so the blind spot happens because of the optic nerve in the back of the eye, which I know you love, Liam.
Right. I remember now.
Yeah. So we got photoreceptors all along the retina, but those photoreceptors need to be sent back to the brain. So that's what the optic nerve is for. So where the optic nerve is inside the eye, there's no photoreceptors there. So that's where your blind spot is. So technically your blind spot would be slightly temporal to, which is just towards your ear side of your vision, but it does get filled in by your brain. So like, I'm looking forward right now, and I know there's like a light switch over there, but that's essentially where my blind spot is.
Well, this reminds me of that little fun test on the internet you do where you have like a bunch of sentences, but the first and last letters are fixed in a correct place, but they scramble the middle letters, but we can still read it. That's me super fascinating. I think that's what we were talking about earlier. So I want to go into two things, and I think there are two very interesting things. First is color. How does color work? And second is depth. How does depth perception? How do we differentiate between near and far objects? Because if you think of 2D, right? The image projected to us is two-dimensional. It's flat, but is the depth? Where's that come from? Is the brain thing? Because if you close one eye, they say people who only have one eye, they don't see depth the way two eyes see, right? So can you get into those?
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk depth first and then color after. Depth essentially, so there can be, I'll start with just the two eyes. So the two eyes are in two anatomically different positions. That's most of the reason for depth. So everything will be like a little bit further away from one eye than the other. And kind of and then we go back from eyes to brain. So your brain, you're actually seeing like two images. You see one with your right eye and one with your left. And essentially, if they're lined up, okay, your brain will snap them together, and then it's one image. So we have some experiments where you guys can use prisms, and you guys might have used Farrell prisms. You were talking about them before, where you can dissociate one image, and then you'll notice that you see two, and then you get double vision. So depth perception comes from having two functioning eyes, seeing the image like twice at two different, and then your brain snaps it together. So there is some monocular cues if you don't have like two functioning eyes. So one is like how fast something moves, like things move faster that are closer to you, and like overlapping certain things. So like overlapping objects, you can get like comparable sizes and shadows. So there is monocular cues that can be done. And this actually is the basis for like a lot of different movies. So we had a couple different presentations for us on like how Lion King did such a great job creating 3D images using 2D, because like they had the lions like walking, and then they had these like gazelles flying way faster like behind them, but you can tell they're moving faster, but they're not covering like as much space in your field because they're way back there. Then they also mentioned like Harry Potter using kind of different things. So like vision and perception kind of is a driver in different like film industries kind of as well.
Well, then how's we see maybe not a lot of like optical illusions, which are usually 2Ds, right? But our brains have interpreted as depth. To me, that's fascinating. It's like, how does it even work? But we know it's flat. We see it's flat, but our brains say, hey, it looks like there's depth.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of all within the film and the art industry, I believe. Because if you draw a road, I believe a road converges into a central point. So I guess if you have things further in, I guess, seem further back. There's a couple different ways to kind of play with it.
Right, but it's like a triangle, right? Like in a basic sense, you're just seeing a triangle, but our brain is like, oh, there's a very long road.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of it comes to not just our vision and what we're seeing, but our perception of the world, where we're just so used to things being a certain height, things being a certain far, and kind of how things work. Our brains, we just kind of, that's how we see the world or how we kind of perceive it. I can switch to color if you guys are good on depth perception. Okay, yeah. So color is a little more complicated. We have a lot less problems with color. I see a lot of patients with color vision like deficiencies. The most common one's red, green, but essentially how color works, and this is would be probably a pretty quick Google search to find a picture too. Is essentially there's three main cones in the eye. So cones are the photoreceptors that are on the back, like on the retina, and small, medium, and long wavelength cones. You guys might even know this a little better than me, but long wavelength, I believe, is red. Small is blue. I get wavelength and hertz mixed up because they're inverse, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got wavelength. We're good. But yeah, small's like blue, purple, and then medium's like green, yellow, and then red would be long. So essentially, everyone has them at a certain. Everyone has these three different cones, and they all have their peak value, like peak intensity, at a certain nanometer number. So I believe green is like, I don't know if it's like 555 or 570, but somewhere along in this range. And then your perception of color is actually from, well, one, how you learned it growing up, and two, a mix of all those cones. So let's say you had a wavelength at like 540, you would see like a lot of like some blue, purple, some green, probably not a lot of red. So those cones would be firing more optically or optimally than your red cone would be.
Well, a kind of quick question. When you say cones, I actually never look it up or I should learn it. Like, are the actual physical look like a cone cell? Because usually you think of cells that is like, like a circular cell, or like plans to be like more rectangular, but cones.
Yeah. So unfortunately, cones. It's kind of like the heart. The heart doesn't look like a heart where you have kind of like a beautiful artistic picture. The cone has a little bit of like an opening kind of at the top, but it's mostly just a photoreceptor kind of stick. So unfortunately, the physical picture is actually not as beautiful. Kind of like I said with the heart.
I was gonna say I always heard the opposite, but I mean, you know better than I do, so that was another one of these eye myths. Weirdly enough, there's so many of them. I don't know. I always heard that the cells kind of looked like cones and rods, but again, like I think it was just one of these. I heard it somewhere and just blindly believed it my whole life without ever checking.
Yeah, I think it mostly just looks like they both just look like long rods, but cones just have a little opening at the top. So I can see how you kind of get away with it.
Yeah, as a scientist to a scientist, they're completely different. They're like, oh, this one's slightly more conic than the other one.
Like a trumpet kind of type is like a rod with an opening out.
You would call that you call a trumpet opening like a flange or something, or I don't know.
A flare.
A flare, sorry, that's right.
So I'm curious on the topic of rods and cones. I know the eye has like this kind of centrally located area that has a much higher density of cones, like the fovea or the fovea centralis or whatever it's called. What's up with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, the macula is kind of the center of the vision. That's why I hear this macular degeneration is a common one, where you're kind of losing. So the macula is kind of the big center of the vision. Then you get closer, you get to the fovea, which is like kind of the very dot of it. And as you get closer in and into the fovea, you get a higher concentration of cones. So cones are well, they're not just color vision; they're also like our detailed vision. So seeing detail, being able to see, being able to read, kind of as low as possible. Get a proper visual acuity is the word. So yeah, just higher cone percentage as you get closer and closer to the fovea, which is the center of the vision. Yeah.
Okay, I do have one more question. I imagine you see a lot of myopic patients. And I was reading an interesting article a couple of years ago that was saying that there's an increase in the number of myopic patients. And one theory was that was lack of exposure to bright sunlight, as like the eye is supposed to stop developing. Like the right hormones aren't being triggered to actually stop that growth. And I'm just wondering if you know anything about that.
Yeah, sure. So myopia control is something that's it's not super new, but it's like a newer branch of optometry where we're trying to prevent people from becoming super nearsighted. Because like we talked about earlier, the myopia is the for the most part the eye kind of stretching out and being a little long, and if it's long, you're more prone to a couple diseases back there because it'll be longer and thinner. So some of the research with myopia control is you want to get it when they're young. Like when you're young, you tend to become more myopic or more nearsighted, kind of as you grow older. So essentially, when you cross over to being nearsighted, you're most likely not going to come back to like a prescription of 0 or become farsighted. You're just going to keep becoming more nearsighted. So there's been some research on stimulating the brain because everything we do now is up close and your vision develops kind of like I said before 9 years old, but also like just through your entire adolescence, your eyes, your whole body is kind of growing. So it can kind of have this cascade effect. If you're doing everything up close, you're training your eyes and your brain to kind of look up close all the time, and then you're never able to necessarily focus far away. So you just keep becoming more and more nearsighted because your eyes, they're just kind of getting the signal to just keep like elongating and keep seeing up, keep being focused for up close. So there's been a fair amount of research, fairly new, with putting different contacts in front of the eye, like putting one on top of the eye to flatten it out and kind of ensure that nearsightedness doesn't develop. And then also, they've been recommending now some days, which is to do activities not just outside, but that have like a far away focus. So I like to say like more than 6 meters away is usually what I go with. So yeah, some of that, the sun exposure, vitamin D, I have seen some of that, but it's harder to prove for sure and harder to do than just telling kids to go outside and not be on screens all day, kind of thing, right? Because that's an easy thing, and especially to talk to parents, just be like, we got to spend some time outside, not doing things like right in front of our face. Yeah,
I can understand why it happens though. Like, you get like the iPad kids and stuff, and it's something about phones and technology is just super alluring to children. And like, when I was a kid, I wanted to play video games all the time, so I get it. But even during COVID, when everyone was on lockdown, there was like a period of a year where I went outside on like an occasional walk, but pretty much that whole year I was just inside, um, working on my masters and not going outside because pandemic stuff. And I remember at the end of it, there was one week I went out, like when things kind of reopened, I went back outside and I remember I was like, oh, my eyes are hurting. Every time I looked far away, I was like, my eyes are so sore. Like, I haven't been working these long distance muscles very much over the last year. And it took like a week for them to kind of calm down a bit.
yeah. I'll touch on that real quick. I mean, that's something super common. We talked about it with kids, and it could be development with Patrick, and then also a lot of people. So accommodating up close, you're using those eye muscles on the lens. The lens is contracting. Your eyes are also converged a little bit. You're kind of putting a good amount of stress on your system looking at something that's not too far away. There's a couple other things that can happen too. There's been some research done saying we don't blink as often when we look at a screen, so our eyes can fatigue more that way. So you're kind of you're fatiguing them by being up close, and you're fatiguing them by being on the screen. So I mean, kind of the take home message is your eyes. There's muscles in there. They're a body part as well. You can't necessarily work them out the same way that biceps or anything like that, but they certainly need their rest the same way that other body parts do.
Okay, Feely, I just want to say my phone recently, I don't know how, maybe I missed it in a previous update, but my phone got this update at some point where it'll like detect if it's too close to your face and it'll say like move me away. I had it turned on and I found out it was annoying and I turned it off. So maybe I should turn it back on. That's probably bad, but it has this feature where now if you're like, laying in bed at 1 a.m. on your phone and it's like right up against your nose, it'll tell you like your face is too close and this is bad for your eyes. So back it up a bit, bud. But I wanted to ask you more so about how did you get into science? So we're running out of time slowly. I don't know if Feely wanted to ask about that, but we're running out of time, so we should maybe get some background questions in there. Well, if Feely has something to say, I'll let him do it. But
Oh, nah, I almost forgot about it. I was gonna make a comment on like, don't blame technology too much, man. Like, we have books before we have screens, and a lot of people were staring at books, all right? Like, I was reading a lot, and reading actually, I think, produce a lot of fatigue into the eyes too. You have to read stuff. Like, watching videos not as bad. Try reading for 10 hours. That's pretty bad too. It's, it's a modern habitual habits of humans. So, what can you do? It can be screen, can be tablets, can be scriptures, can be books. But most activities that we do in the modern world is like close to us. So, anyways, we should move on to your kind of background and how you got into optometry. So you did your chemistry degree, which in a sense like quite distinct from the optometry. For to me, it's like optometry have a lot of optics, which is physics, right? But chemistry is a lot about chemical structures and reactions and whatnot. So how did that convert or how what's that like transitioning into optometry, and what really got you interested in optometry in the first place?
Yeah, so I can try to hit this pretty quick. So I actually got interested in optometry in like late high school, grade like 12. I took like an intro optics. They had an intro optics chapter in physics. So most of my classmates are mostly biology, like biology, chemistry, kind of health. I actually got interested from the physics side. I just at grade 12 kind of looking at what I wanted to do, and it just seemed to fit the bill. I didn't want to be an engineer. I kind of knew I didn't want to do that. And then I also didn't want to work in a hospital and be a medical doctor because I wanted to see, like I said, I want to see some patients that are just, happy to see, not have any major problems. Not that I mind working with diseases, but I don't want everybody to be kind of, poor off is the term I'd use. So I thought it was a good mix. A lot of my buddies became engineers. I didn't want to be a medical doctor. This seemed like kind of a good place to meet in the middle. So I shadowed somebody. It seemed interesting. I just went to undergrad. I thought, if it works out, it works out. We'll see what happens. Yeah, and then I most of my grade school, like I did mostly math, physics, and I like that kind of stuff. But in undergrad, I just chose chemistry. It just kind of was pulling me towards it. So, and I don't regret it. Chemistry was good to me too. So yeah, I just kind of got that done. Even though I don't do much of my advanced chemistry. I mean, I don't use a lot of advanced chemistry like third or fourth year classes in like optometry school or now. But yeah, it was good to me. I don't have any regrets. I think everything has its own different little section. So kind of the physics portion was a lot of like the optics part, kind of the like the early years of school, which is like the refraction, the getting the glasses, the making sure images line up, understanding how kind of some of this stuff works, perception of the world. And then the biology is kind of the disease side and how the eyes work. And then the chemistry would be a lot of the pharmacy side. So different like drugs, medication. So like biochem would have been, biochem, OChem would be kind of important. So they all the big sciences have their own place. Some a little more favored than others. Like I think it would have been definitely advantageous to take an optics class in undergrad, but I just didn't really bother with it. Yeah, so that's how I got. It's been kind of the path to get here.
The optics classes at St. FX were something. I enjoyed them, but many other people did not for reasons I won't get into.
I also enjoyed them, but
I enjoyed the optics one a lot, but not the lasers one. Surprisingly,
it depends on kind of who your professor is, what the curriculum is, where you're at, how many if other people like it. So, yeah, it's kind of all variable.
So then I want to walk you down the memory lane a little bit. So were you always interested in science when you were young, like, or what was that like when you were young? Like, were you more like an artsy kid? Of like, what got you into interest in science in general?
Science specifically. This is a science podcast. I always liked. I always was hot on math. I liked math a lot.
Me too.
Yeah, I didn't really jump to the really sciencey side probably until like pretty late, like maybe grade 10. Just started doing like you would just notice because early high school they kind of just grazed the surface of everything. And I would just notice like we would just change chapters and we did like we just went to the chemistry chapter and it was just about like atoms and stuff. And be like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And then we get to one about plants or animals. I'd be like, oh, that's garbage. And then I would I just learned that you can just do some science that's not plant and animals, and you can just do the chapters that you actually liked. And I always liked math. I never liked history. Hated history. I took English and French. I hated those classes. So yeah, I was always close to science. I always thought I was kind of a math guy, and then just kind of as education went forward, my math kind of fused into my science, and then yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here. I actually, something I didn't mention earlier, I actually taught chemistry camps in the summer at Feely. You would have known, but yeah, so I liked hanging around all the science people. I volunteered for like one little biology thing. They have I think they have a shark in the biology department, like a small shark fossil or something. So yeah, I mean, I always found all this stuff like fairly interesting because like who else knows about it? You know what I mean? Like you don't just cross this stuff on a day to day. You have to kind of you look for it, and then you can really learn to appreciate it.
Biology, I always thought was like biology is my favorite, and then yeah, around grade 10, I realized I liked math a lot. So I kind of did the reverse. But biology is hard, right? Like chemistry and biology, they are hard. Math and physics are kind of like simpler in some sense. And so I always like I kind of tended towards those because I was like, oh, it's easier to just imagine little particles and spheres and simple things opposed to like this complex interaction of light and happening in your retina and inverse images and brain signals. It's like, oh, that's really complicated.
Liam, you know that those statements only apply to us, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not same. I think it's just different, right? So I was in your taxonomy class in diversity of life. I remember that was pretty fun. It challenged me a lot. I don't have to memorize all the stuff, right? Well, I'll just move on a bit onto your future. So the question is we always ask our guest is hopes and dreams. So where do you see yourself in the future? Well, I'm not talking in terms of times like 5, 10 years, but who do you see yourself being? Like, do you want to continue optometry? Like, do you want to pursue more advanced topics, or like, what's your goal? What are your hopes and dreams?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I haven't really thought about it so too much. I thought about getting to this point and kind of taking a breather now. But I'd say one thing I would always be interested in would be potentially being a professor, kind of teaching, or and then also doing like research. So I did like a senior research project. I did it on the visual system in putting, like for golf. So kind of that's one of my pastimes. So kind of mixing those things together. So I think kind of both sides, like if they had more schools, like they only have the one in Canada, and there's none out west, and I'd want to be at one out west. But if they opened one out west, I would definitely consider applying for a teaching position. I think it would be fun because I like to kind of one of my favorite things to do, even at the job right now, is talk to young, talk to the like smart, aspiring kind of scientists, kind of like yourself, or other medical students. I just like having kind of thought-provoking conversations. I think teaching people in optometry school would be pretty cool for me. If that never happens, I mean, I'm okay with it. It's just something that I would be interested in if the opportunity followed me. Otherwise, I might look into a couple like business things. Like I'm working under a corporation right now. I just like to learn, as I'm sure you guys do. So kind of just learning how businesses work. I don't like marketing all that much, but kind of the expenses of optometry, the equipment, kind of getting one going. So those would be kind of I'm kind of passively looking into the business side of optometry, and then if the wind blows a school towards the west coast in Canada, then yeah, I look into that too.
Very nice. Good answer. It's a loaded question, you know? Well, unless anyone have other comments, well, thank you for coming. Before we get to the story and such, I will get Patrick to tell us or you guys how to contact us and perhaps how to contact him if you have any questions or if you want to be contacted at all. If you don't, they can pass along the questions to us and we can pass it on to you.
Yes, so if you much like Austin, would like to be a guest on this show, we would be more than happy to have you. There are several ways in which you can reach out to us, including our email. We are hyperthesispodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram. We post updates, so you'll see an update for this episode along with a couple pictures, as we mentioned, on our Instagram. We are at the Hyperthesis, so you can send us a DM if you have questions or comments or concerns. Who knows? If you have feedback for us, we are more than happy to hear it. You can also, again, just find us, keep updated on our Instagram. Austin, if people would like to contact you with questions, would you like that? And if so, how would you like people to contact you?
Oh, that's a great question. Great question. Philly, how do you get people to contact you? Email?
Yeah, usually email.
Okay.
I'm not a social media person. How about let them contact us and we will pass on the questions to you.
Okay, that works.
Yeah. So if you do have questions for Austin, send us an email, send us a DM on Instagram. We are also on YouTube, so you can check us out there. You can leave a comment and you can leave questions there in the comments as well. Also, make sure to like and subscribe and share our videos. We are on pretty much whatever podcasting service you listen to. So whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, which is, by the time this episode goes out, will be, I think, just a couple days from death as it transitions into YouTube Music. We are based out of Spotify, but you can listen to us wherever you want. Feel free to give us a rating or a subscribe or a download or whatever the metric is that your podcasting service allows. And again, if you have questions for Austin about kind of the intricacies of optometry, make sure to send us an email or a message. Or if you do have burning questions, it's probably time you got your eyes checked. So go book an appointment with your local optometrist. And if you happen to live in Kelowna, maybe go check it out there. So thank you for listening and contact us.
Well. So we gotta get to the last part of the podcast. But thank you, Austin, for coming. Feel free to jump in into interrupting the story too. This has been probably the biggest bombardment of information we have so far, because we have, as physicists, we have so many questions about the eyes, that we have no idea, or very wrong ideas about, which hopefully have been cleared up. At least for me, has been cleared up quite a bit. So the story for today is going to be on the brief history of optics.
So for today's story, we did talk about the eye a lot today. And I mean, the eye itself has been controversial in terms of its origins. You can go listen to our evolution episode if you'd like to learn more about how it could have formed, especially in what's known as convergent evolution, where multiple different life forms will develop similar structures within them. But as a general overview of not only the eye, but of optics, the story is the history of optics. So optics, which is the study of light and vision, has quite a rich history that spans ancient civilizations to modern everything. It's everywhere, from some of the doctors that we go see, to the phones that we use, to the cameras that are on those phones. Optics are everywhere, and they all began with the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians who crafted lenses. Now, we don't really have too much evidence of the processes they used. We can take some guesses, but the crafting of these lenses were followed by Greek philosophers like, this was in our last episode too, Empedocles. Feely, you know it better.
Is it Empedocles?
Yes, Empedocles. And Euclid, who pondered the nature of light and its interaction with the eye. So the eye really kind of helped trigger at least thinking about how light worked. Now, this early exploration laid out the foundation for geometrical optics, which was further developed by figures like the hero of Alexandria and Claudius Ptolemy in the Greco-Roman world. Now, in medieval Islamic world, scholars like Al-Kindi and Ibn al-Hatam, who we've definitely mentioned before a couple times in this podcast, they all made significant contributions to optics, and Al-Hatem definitely made contributions to many different fields. Al-Kindi proposed that a theory of rays were emitted by all objects, while Al-Hatem challenged Ptolemy's views, which again is important to challenge these ancient views, which were held for honestly millennia in some cases, and really emphasized the role of light rays entering the eye for vision. Now, Al-Hatem's work include the Book of Optics, which had a profound impact on Western Europe and earned him the title the father of modern optics. Now, medieval Europe saw further advancement in optics with figures like Robert Grosseteste, Roger Bacon, and John Peckham exploring light's properties and its effects on vision. Bacon, not to be confused with Francis Bacon or Kevin Bacon, was influenced by Arab scholars and described the function of corrective lenses and burning glasses, laying the groundwork for modern optics. So these people were trying to develop these different lenses and figure out how they worked, and really made a lot of progress, especially as technology helped make clearer and more pure glasses that we could actually see through. Now, the Renaissance and early modern periods brought about very significant discoveries. Johannes Kepler delved into the laws of optics, including the inverse square law of light intensity. So if you've taken a high school physics class, you know exactly how light dims as you get further from it. And then we also have figures like Willibord Snellius and René Descartes, who contributed to our understanding of refraction. So Descartes wasn't just a philosopher who liked to think, but he contributed to these different theories. And Christian Huygens explored the wave nature of light. And at this point, Isaac Newton came along, and he did a lot of experiments with prisms and lenses that led to his color theory and the invention of the reflecting telescope, which really helped revolutionize astronomy, along with work done by people like Galileo. Now, at this time, there was some debate whether light was a wave or if it was just single kind of particles that passed through everywhere. Newton was on one side, a lot of other people were on the wave side. And things like diffractive optics, which were studied particularly by Francesco Maria Grimaldi and Thomas Young, revealed the wave-like behavior of light. You might recognize Young's name as being famous for the double slit experiment, which demonstrated interference patterns supporting this wave theory of light that was first proposed by Huygens. Now, the development of lenses and lens making also played a crucial role. So Al-Hatem and Roger Bacon discussed the use of lenses for corrective vision. So that was really quite pivotal in the field of, I guess, optics for medicine and for health. And eyeglasses were actually invented in the 13th century. Now, I did mention before that Galileo Galilei improved upon the telescope design, while Cornelius Drebbel and others contributed to the development of the microscope. So we were starting to use these more pure glass lenses in more places to actually see beyond what the eye could see, and also to help what the normal human eye could see if it was not quite right, as we discussed earlier. Now, the field of quantum optics, which I will not get into far in depth, we could probably talk about that for episodes, but it emerged in the 20th century with Max Planck's quantum theory and Albert Einstein's work on the photoelectric effect, of course laying the foundation, as we've talked about before. Now, George Sudarshan and Roy J. Glauber, along with Leonard Mendel, applied quantum mechanics to light, and this led to the study of many things such as coherent states, squeeze light, quantum information theory. We've had Dean on the show. His episode will be listed in the show notes below, but we talked about optics with him. It's truly everywhere, especially in physics research. It's hard to go into a working physics laboratory and not see a breadboard full of components for optics experiments. And even in other fields such as remote sensing. It's mainly based on optics. Now, today, optics continues to be a thriving field with many applications, including telecommunications, laser technology, especially with LiDAR coming out, medical imaging, quantum computing, and it just really showcases the importance of optics and being able to see everything as clearly as we can.
All right. Thank you, Patrick, for the story. I think I have a couple comments. Ray theory is one of the very prominent theory that made everything happen. But, as we know, it fails when, Liam, the word I'm looking for?
Fails when the size of your object is comparable to the size of the wavelength of the light.
No, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say caustics.
No, caustics are ray theory.
Oh, really? Huh.
So fun fact for Austin, well, they're wave theory too, but fun fact for Austin, the logo of this podcast is just when you have a spherical mirror or a spherical lens, it doesn't have a perfect focus, right? You need a parabolic mirror or a parabolic lens. So you get spherical aberration, you get this imperfect focus. That's what that's the logo for our podcast. It's just a spherical reflection. But if you zoom in close enough on it, so you can create this in a coffee mug. You can shine kind of light in a coffee mug, and it makes this intensity cusp shape. If you zoom in close enough on it, around the size of the wavelength of the light, you get this diffraction pattern, and that's what our logo is. So there's optics there.
Yeah. So, it's a PRC function, eh?
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, and the other thing optics is really good is the discovery of gravitational waves against the LIGO, right? Uses two lasers, and they're making a new one in space, so it's not exactly LIGO, because this one is in space. Apparently, that's one gonna be the stuff that's gonna hopefully discover a lot of more sensitive gravitational wave that's coming in.
Everything we see in the cosmos is thanks to light, because we have telescopes, they see light, and now we have gravitational wave detectors, but those are also, even though they detect gravitational signals, they work with lasers, so you need light.
All right, so I think it's gonna be our longest episode, but we're gonna end it here, and thanks Austin for coming. I'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.